Now to show you just how easy it is to use this little HuskyLens camera to be able to gain access. Now to show you just how easy it is to use this HuskyLens camera to do some facial recognition, I've got a nice little photo here of some two lovely ladies. And on the HuskyLens here, if I switch over pressing the learning button and I come over to make sure I'm on face recognition, we can hide that. As I come over and I look at our image here, you can see that we have one face recognized and two faces recognized inside of our HuskyLens screen. Now we can see that the HuskyLens obviously works not so great when your image is too far away or when it's quite small, but as I get closer, things start to get a lot more accurate. So the first thing we have to do is you have to be able to actually learn a face, because it's not very good just to recognize the fact that a face is there. We have to be able to say that, hey, I've actually got a face up and running here. So up on the HuskyLens, you can see in the middle here, you've got this little orange, yellow plus, and it's kind of pulsing between orange and yellow. That means that the HuskyLens is ready to learn a face. And learning a face is super simple. All you have to do is come on up, point that orange plus to a specific face. I'm going to put it to the lady on the right here. And I'm going to press that learning button, the single button. And then now it recognizes that as a single face ID that pops up. So we can have an individual face. We have one face recognized here, and we have a second face that's actually recognized as blue. Now, if you wanted to, you could also turn it around and try to take a selfie with this so it can actually recognize your own personal face. And you can see up on the top, there's that little RGB LED, and when it recognizes a face, that there is a face it doesn't recognize, it's going to show up as blue. If I were to press the learning button for it to be able to learn my face now, it would show up as yellow, and if it was a face that it recognized, so for instance, if I were to take this image and put it in front of it, it would show up as So if I were to show this in front of a face that does recognize, you can see that it goes green as a face that it recognizes. Now if you want to forget a face that you have, you can see press the function button again and then just click again to forget, and now we've forgotten our face. But for this purpose of the tutorial, we're going to train on a single face here. So I'm going to train on the plus button inside this woman's face, train on her, and now it shows up as blue. Now in this tutorial, I'm only using a single face with just a single frame on this, but that's not the best thing for facial recognition. You probably want to be able to have when you're rotating in your face. So right now, the HuskyLens is only capable of recognizing my face when it's looking straight on. If I were to rotate my face like so, then it would also be able to recognize this as well. So if you want to be able to recognize a face like this, you would hold the HuskyLens up, looking at yourself. You'd push and hold the learning button, and then you simply just have to rotate your face around and it will recognize your face from multiple different angles. So let's actually get into a sample program for how you might program this in CircuitPython. So before we go any further, you have to make sure you have a specific library installed on your CircuitPython device. So with my CircuitPy plugged in, we come to the lib folder. You have to make sure that you have the CircuitPy Husky lib added in here. If you don't have this, this isn't going to work because this is where we're going to be pulling a lot of our functions from. I'm going to have a link to the description of that down below. So first off, we're going to import board as usual and also import time. And then from our CircuitPy Husky lib, we're going to import the HuskyLens class. Oops. The HuskyLens library. Then we need to initialize this HuskyLens inside of a program. So we're going to call this one a HuskyLens or HL. You can call this whatever it is you want. You call it a HuskyLens. Personally, I'm a lazy programmer, so I like to have smaller levels. And HuskyLens is going to be equal to our HuskyLens library. We're going to call this in I2C mode. Our SDA pin is going to be equal to our board.sda. And our SCL pin is going to be equal to our board.scl. That's it for now. Now, we can also, inside this code, change which algorithm we're currently using. So remember, the HuskyLens is capable of measuring 7 different algorithms: April tags, line tracking, face recognition, and so on. We're going to go ahead and turn this into the facial recognition algorithm. So we're going to say our hl.algorithm. And then in all capitals, it's going to be algorithm face recognition. And this is simply going to swap to facial recognition mode. So now we come into our main loop for our code. So we're going to say while true, our results are going to be equal to hl.get hl.learned blocks. So with this library, a block is that little square frame that shows up around images when you're recognizing them. It will return however many blocks you have. So in this simple program, we're just going to show how many blocks we've actually recognized. So here we're going to say if results. That means that if something was actually recognized, we're simply going to do print detected face count, and then we'll put in the length of our results because it's going to return a list of a bunch of different objects for us. And then we're going to add a quick time.sleep of maybe a second so that we don't completely overwhelm our serial port here. So now let's go ahead and save this, open up our serial port. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to come over, I'm going to hover over top of our image here until we get a couple of our faces showing up inside of our image, and we can see that we have a few faces showing up on the HuskyLens screen. So if we come over to our serial port, we should be able to see that presently our detected face count is 1 because I'm only looking at one learned object. If I were to have learned multiple objects here, I would have multiple objects showing up as detected face count. So as I move the camera away, you know, it says no object detected. As I move the camera towards, it starts to say it's got to detect a face count. But it's not super helpful for us just to have how many detected faces we've actually seen. Instead, it's more useful to actually get some of that data that we can pull out here. So let's come back and let's change some of this data so it makes a little more sense. We still need to say if results, because we need to know whether we actually have something valuable or something that's actually true. And because we have multiple objects learned, we're going to say for I in results, which means we're going to loop through the number of results that we've actually picked up. If our I.ID value, so the current, before we get any further into this, it would be helpful to know what the results thing actually does, or when you have a block. So once you've picked up a face, it's going to return you a whole bunch of values that can use with that. It's going to return you the ID number. It's going to return you the X and the Y position on the screen itself. So between 0, 0 is the top left-hand corner of the HuskyLens screen. And the middle is 160 and 120. So if we were to look at the HuskyLens screen here, this top left corner is 0, 0, 320 all the way, 240 down at the bottom, and then 320, 240. So if I were to be directly in the middle, it would be 160 and 120 on a standard Cartesian grid coordinate. So this library will return for you those specific values as well for those X and Y. It'll also return your height and your width in terms of the number of pixels that that object block is taking up on the screen. It'll also return whether it is actually learned or not. And then a few other things that we aren't actually going to use in this tutorial. So because it's going to return however many objects we've actually returned, we're going to say for I in results. We're going to loop through all of our results. And if our I.ID is how we're going to grab that specific attribute from this object here. If I.ID is equal to 0, so that is our first learned object, we're simply going to print out all that data that we know. So we're going to print learned. We'll put an I.learned to be able to grab that value. We'll also print the X value, and we'll say I.X. We'll also print the Y value, and we'll do I.Y. We'll also print our height, and I.height, and we'll print our width. So now if we save this over and we look at our serial port, line 25, I messed up. I forgot to put a parentheses on that print. So let's save it one more time. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to hover over our HuskyLens face, and we've got our blue face recognized looking at this image right here. So now we're going to see what our current information is when we look at our serial port here. Oh, and I made a mistake because this is actually ID 1, not ID 0. So let's save this down one more time. So there we go. So now we can see in our code output, we've got our face, and let's go to desktop. I had a mistake here earlier. I put an ID 0, it's supposed to be ID 1. And if we look at our print statements here, we can see that we have our learned for this current face is true. Its X position on the HuskyLens is at 178 to the center of that box, and its Y position is at 114. It has a height of 87 pixels tall and a width of 65. If I were to move closer to the face and center it in, we'll notice that our X and our Y and the height and width have changed quite a bit. We can actually almost fill up the entire screen here just looking at that one face, and as I move back up, we get different and smaller values. Something else you might find helpful on the HuskyLens screen is that on the HuskyLens screens presently, when we look at a face, it just kind of says face and ID 1. Not very helpful for us. So what we can do is we can actually set some custom names that show up on top of our HuskyLens screen. So I come over to my code here. Just after we switch to the algorithms, we can say HuskyLens.set custom name. Oops. We do hl.set custom name. And then in a string, you put in custom name you want. So I might say lady1. And then after a comma, you put in the ID that you are renaming. In our case, it is ID1. So if I save this over, and we look at the HuskyLens when it comes over to lady1 now, instead of showing up as face, it now shows up as lady1 on this face. So now we have face here, and we have lady1 at ID1. And that's it, pretty simple stuff. So now you can actually start having some other things happen with facial recognition. So you can just grab your current, all you need to do is get your results list. If the results list returns something as true, loop through your list, and then if that ID is 1, you could even set booleans to be true. And we could say that like, we could say authorized face equals true. And if there were no results, we could say that authorized face equals false. And then you can have different things happening depending on whether you have an authorized face for that or not. You could have, say, a custom locking door where if a face that is authorized comes up, you could open up the door and unlock it depending on if there's a server there. Now, I highly recommend you don't do that on anywhere where it is critical security failure, because as we've seen with the HuskyLens, it's not like modern cameras where it's capable of recognizing when a face is moving or face is actually there. When we just have a photo here, it's good enough for actually picking that up. So I hope you found that as a useful tutorial. If you'd like access to more robotics resources, you can consider joining the community down below if you want some feedback from myself as well, or access to code snippets, CAD files, and things like that. And as always, best of luck on your next robotics project.